So far, 2022 has not been the best year to build a cheap gaming PC. Supply shortages are still in full effect, and when you can find parts, they are way too expensive. However, we have put together a PC that you can build right now that's not only cheap, but it can play all the games you want, above 60 frames per second. And yes, we will be including the benchmarks at the end of the video. We know the words good and cheap should never be used in the same sentence when referring to PC gaming, but you might just be surprised. With great newly released products coming from AMD, Nvidia, and Intel, we actually have an option to game on a budget, and for less than a scalped PS5. With all the shortages in mind, you'll be surprised how much we built this gaming PC for. Cases are the one piece of the computer that we do not want to pick for you. Everyone has their own taste, and with everyone's personal taste comes their personal price. Personally, you can pay whatever you want for your case, but we're going to be sticking to that $60 to $100 range. Our preferences would be the Thermaltake V200 or the NZXT H510. Both are well built, nice to work with, and clean looking cases. When building on a budget, you have to hold back slightly on aesthetics. Finding a good base of a case, you can always make upgrades to it later. Good expandability will come with the best and newest platform, in this case, the LGA 1700 socket. With Intel's newest 12th generation performance, I'm not embarrassed anymore to feature it in any of my builds. The ASRock B660M HDV will do the job well and not for a bankrupting price. For $110, this motherboard offers all the necessities, such as gigabit LAN, 2 M.2 slots, and PCIe Gen 4 speeds. This is going to be necessary to get the full performance out of our graphics card. This motherboard still uses DDR4 memory, so you won't have to wait to hopefully get your hands on DDR5. And to fit along with our PCIe Gen 4 standards, we have the i3 12100F. With 4 cores and 8 threads running at a boost clock of 4.3 GHz will be more than enough for this computer to run all your favorite games, at the affordable price of only $110. With the i5 12400F also available for $50 more, it's a good option if you want just the extra cores and threads. With all the games you're going to be playing, you're obviously going to need a place to store them. That's where the 500GB Crucial M.2 comes into play. For $55, this M.2 is a steal. Never ever will I ever recommend buying a hard drive to play games. With SSD pricing only going down, it's a no-brainer to get an SSD over a hard drive. But do a bit of research. For example, at the time of recording, the Western Digital Black SN750 SE, which is a 500GB PCIe 4.0 internal SSD, is going for only $50. So look out for those deals. Leave some comments below if you think of any parts that you can put in the system. The Crucial M.2 that we're going to be using has a read speed of 2300 megabytes per second and a write speed of 940 megabytes per second. Luckily, our motherboard supports DDR4 and we don't have to pay the crazy prices for DDR5. So for this computer, we chose 16GB at 3200 MHz. I'm going to be honest, RAM really doesn't matter that much. As long as the timing and speeds are acceptable, at the end of the day, RAM is just RAM. We have the G-Skill Ripjaw 5 series coming in at $65, and then we have the Oloy RGB series, which comes in right now on sale for $60. But we would always recommend staying away from the ugly green stuff. For the parts we're going to be using, the power supply doesn't need to be that crazy, but we do recommend that you get at least a 600 watt power supply. The reason you want a 600 watt power supply is for future upgrades. If you want to upgrade, you want that extra power. For the power supply, we went pretty cheap, but very reliable. We have the Corsair VS series. This is the VS600. It's non-modular, but it is 80+ certified. This only comes in at $40. The most important part of a gaming PC is the graphics card. The GPU we picked is a newly released 6500 XT by AMD. If you saw our last video, we compared this graphics card to the upcoming 3050. Although we would have loved to use a 3050 in this build, at the time of recording, it's not available on the shelves yet. The 6500 XT can be found almost anywhere from $200 to $270. With the computer now built, we can look at the total price. Using the links that we have posted in the description, you can build this computer for around $675 to $700, depending on what upgrades you make and what parts you pick. Obviously, some of these prices aren't the original retail price. That's just what's going to happen with new hardware. Hopefully, as time goes on, the Intel CPUs become more available at those retail prices, as well as the graphics cards. That's why with even our price saying $635, we're expecting to spend closer to $700. But looking and waiting for sales, you can easily cut this price down to less than $600. Newegg has deals all the time, so if you see a good deal out there, go for it. Just because it's not on our list doesn't mean it's not a good part. Obviously, for your motherboard, you want to stick with that PCIe Gen 4 standard, especially with the 6500 XT. But sticking to the 12th gen platform and using a 6500 XT, you should see great performance. Considering what comparable prices of pre-builts on places like CyberPower and iBuyPower, this is an absolute steal. So now that we've built the computer, let's get into the performance and see how well this thing actually games. Here's some benchmarks for some AAA titles and a few esports. For example, Cyberpunk is so hard to run, but on low to medium settings, we have a 1% low of 38 and an average frame rate of 45. This was all taken within the city, so if you go to the outskirts, you might experience just a little better. Overwatch is one of the more graphically demanding titles, and on epic settings, it has a 1% low of 105 and an average FPS of 130. Even if I hate to admit it, Fortnite is still insanely popular. On competitive settings, the 1% low is 165 and the average is 260. On the graph above, we have a lot of really demanding titles, some esports and some AAA games. As you can see, this computer is insanely powerful. Even with the i3 and the 6500 XT, you get really respectable 1080p frame rates. If you want something that's a little more powerful, like I said, go with the 3050. The 3050 will be slightly more expensive and a little harder to find, but the 3050 will experience much better frame rates than the 6500 XT, and obviously that extra VRAM will mean a lot.
Do you want to know our picks for the best graphics cards for 2022? Click the link to find out our top choices. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for future content.